Okay, Claude.
Well, sometimes in baseball you have to expect the unexpected.
What was the adjustment like for you in 1969? Because you said that
is someone who achieved something against you guys we might never see again ever in baseball, given the way things are today. Larry Jaster. He shot the Dodgers 5 times in 1968. What were your impressions and thoughts of Larry Jaster, and what do you think it was that you guys weren't able to beat him and hit off of him?
Innings increase from 68 to 69.
It was an amazing stretch.
I just think it was the way that the season began.
The thing that I remember vividly about it is that
intending to pitch 9 innings every time you go out there, and pretty good
that's the way it was
up there
from him
back in those days, and it was the location we prided
that he was getting our hitters out
as far as we could go in the ball game.
High fastballs and high cutters, sliders.
Some years where you have an exceptional amount of complete games,
and he did.
And you have others where maybe
we would hit fly balls.
You never know which way the ball's going to bounce.
To left center,
we never know about weather or anything else.
And
so you just take them one game at a time. And
we just
turned out that
one fly ball after
the one
another
factor, I think, that's responsible for is obviously staying healthy.
Make outs, and Austin.
And how were you feeling physically after that season, knowing that you had pitched the most innings of your career? How were you feeling physically back then after that happened?
You know what? I felt fantastic. I was not tired.
High fastballs. I mean, he threw some curveballs up there too.
66 when we went
normally
to the World
get
Series.
Hit pretty hard, and we just didn't have the power to get it over the fence, and we'd hit
and I got to the World
harmless
Series
fly balls out there. So one day Austin got so frustrated that he ordered Carol Behringer, who was our batting practice pitcher, and no longer with us, by the way.
I didn't feel that way.
He ordered him to throw the entire batting practice, and he didn't want
what
him
you
to
have
throw
to do
anything but curveballs.
In that period of time, it was normal to pitch every 4 days. We did it.
And it was kind of a funny thing because,
if you start dwelling on negatives and listening to them,
throwing curveballs up there,
they'll eat you alive. And
never saw before.
I always prided myself in not
that was Austin's
part of the
answer to
my mind.
Trying to get back at Larry Jaster.
And 69 also had a famous moment in your career.
He had an amazing
because Gaylord Perry, the Hall of Fame pitcher, once said that there will be a man on the moon before he hits a home run. So let's go July 20th. And that's where they put the man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the Giants had to face the Dodgers, and you faced Gaylord Perry, and he hit the first and only home run of his career off of you. Take me back to that at bat. Where did you throw him, and what do you remember about him hitting that home run against you?
How often did you guys get hits in batting practice? The team, what was it like hitting curveballs? And just wondering in batting practice how often you guys were able to make contact with the ball, since Walter had ordered curveballs to be thrown in response to Larry Jaster.
It had anything to do with that more than anything going out of the ballpark. We would have gone out of any ballpark, and guys' attention. And I took my hand to him and back, and I really wasn't aware of the situation. And I think that happened. Feet itself until hit curveballs. I think they took it as a joke. After my career was over, I ran into Gaylord here at the same time at the ballpark in Arlington, across to him that how serious he was. We were talking about that. How he told me that story, and that's the first time I had heard it. And I think.
And then, what was your reaction to that then when he told you that?
Well, I got a kick out of it because of the.
How long did you think take you to adjust to a lowering of the pitching mound in '69? Because you actually embraced the challenge, you did very well. But how long did it take to adjust? Did it feel weird at first with the pitching mound being lowered?
What a good hitter he was, and of course every pitcher jokes around like that. I don't think it affected me that much. I think told him the day that you hit a home run itself will be the day is that something that you have to constantly adjust to.
That was a very prophetic statement indeed. And so in the early 70s, Claude, there were rumors that came about the Dodgers trying to trade you, or they wanted to trade you, and I think they tried trading you to the Angels, but they turned that move down. So why did the rumors come about? What were the reasons they were trying to trade you in the early 70s?
And so I think at that time once you get that Doug Rao was coming up you've adjusted as a rookie, and he was I've got a telephone call pitcher. They thought that he was going to have a real good career.
Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Osteen. Maybe we could talk later if you have time, or I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry to keep you for your time, but thank you so much.
At that time, when you started to get at the age that I was, you started hearing those rumors, and it's still true today, I think. When a pitcher gets to be a certain age, he starts to become a suspect instead of a prospect.
So when you finally were traded to the Astros, how did you feel? Were you sad the fact that you left the Dodgers after 9 seasons? Was it something you weren't surprised because your name had been thrown around? How exactly would you describe your feelings when you found out you were going to the Astros?
Well, I had so much pride about being a Dodger, and you know, the history that was behind my career and the times that I was there, and all the happenings, going to the World Series and winning the World Series and everything. And I think any pitcher feels basically the same way, that if you get traded or the rumors start flying around, you can't help but feel like that the club that you're on doesn't want you anymore. And I think you fail to kind of accept the fact that this is the way the game goes. It's a business, and it's going to happen. It happens to everyone. And there comes a time, no matter how much of a star you are or how well you've done, there comes a time when you're going to be expendable. And I don't think a player sees that part of it right away. And of course, I had a situation where I could approve or disapprove of the trade, and I had a chance to talk with Spec Richardson, who was the general manager of the Astros, before I accepted the trade, and they kind of assured me that everything was going to be okay financially, and so I approved the trade. And I think one of the things that makes you approve it is what I just said. You feel kind of like you're not wanted anymore where you left.
That really is an interesting point, yes. And I was just wondering, maybe, what else do you think might have played factors in you accepting that trade? Could it be because they're in Texas and you were born in Tennessee, so you have ties to the South and it was closer to where you grew up? What else do you think were some factors to accepting that trade?
Well, I was aware of who was on the ball club with Houston. They always had a pretty good ball club, and I had a lot of success pitching against those teams in my years. I had a real good record against Houston, and the other thing was I pitched really well in the Astrodome, and so those factors plus the financial agreement that I came to had a lot to do with it.
But you wouldn't spend much time in Houston. You later be traded to the Cardinals in 1974 down the stretch. And we're talking about a team, Claude, that potentially could have won its division that year. I'm talking about St. Louis, although you guys wound up in second place. I think you were 2 games back ultimately of the Pirates. You made 2 starts. You lost both. We were mostly in relief. And that was also the year that Lou Brock stole 118 bases, which was a then Major League record, and he finished second in NL MVP voting to Steve Garvey, another former teammate of yours. What do you reflect on the most, or what do you think about? What most comes to mind when I mention your Cardinal days?
Well, it was an interesting time. I spent most of my time there,
as a reliever, and I think probably the most important game that I can remember is I came in relief in Shea Stadium, and I pitched nine and a third shutout innings in an extra inning game that went 27 innings. And I think we won the game. In fact, I know we won the game in the 27th inning. And like you say, we were fighting Pittsburgh that year for the pennant, and we had to go to Philadelphia after that game was over, and obviously it was over in the wee hours of the morning, and we took a bus from New York City to Philadelphia, and I think we pulled into Philadelphia somewhere around 6 o'clock in the morning, and we went out that very night and played, I believe, close to 15 innings against the Phillies, and we won that game. And after winning those two games and enduring for all those hours, those 2 consecutive days, everyone kind of had the feeling that there's no way we were going to be denied the pennant. We really felt confident about it, and of course we obviously didn't win it. We had a situation in Montreal where we kind of let things get away. Gibson, I believe, had the Expos 2-1 or something like that, and we had Al Robosky and Mike Garman as our top relievers, and they were having great years. And they were warmed up in the bullpen, and Gibson was pitching where he had a situation with his knees. He was having to have the fluid drained off of his knees, and yet he was still out there. And I think Shane Dietz went out to take him out, and Gibson ran Shane Dietz back in the dugout. And the next hitter was Mike Jorgensen, and I believe it was the first pitch after Red had gotten back in the dugout. Mike Jorgensen hit a 2-run homer and beat us in that ball game. And that was very costly because it was like the last week of the season.
And then you never really recover from that then.
Oh, it was hard to. I think we ended up with a situation where the Cubs were playing Pittsburgh, and it was one of those deals where if so-and-so wins, there has to be a makeup game played, and we were all three. There were 3 or 4 teams involved in the results of whichever way it went, and obviously it didn't go our way.
Lou Brock, 1974, 118 stolen bases. What were your thoughts of seeing the guy in person on your own team? What was that year like, and what was it like? Well, not the whole year, obviously, because you joined them late in the season, but what was it like during your brief stint with them and having Lou Brock on the team and knowing that he was making history that season?
Well, it was really exciting times because I had, of course, been on the same team with Wills when he stole 104 bases, and having the privilege of seeing Brock do it in Brock's way. They were kind of 2 different types of base runners. Maury got a lot of his stolen bases on being very intelligent about which way to slide and trick slides and stuff like that, and obviously both of them had speed. But Brock, he stole his bases on almost running full speed on the first step after he broke from first. And he kind of slid right straight into the bag. So not only watching both of those different styles
and so forth, you had a chance to watch how they prepared for it and what they went through and how the fans treated them and so forth. And I remember Wills got a lot of threats about stealing bases. No one wanted him to set the record or anything, and Brock was the same way. No one wanted Brock to break it, and of course I had the privilege of seeing all three of them, not only Wills but Brock, and I think we were playing the Oakland A's when Ricky Henderson broke all of them. So I was in a lucky position, and it was exciting times.
If I can make a couple of corrections, though, Claude. First of all, I think even though you were teammates with Maury Wills, yes, I think when he broke the record was in '62 when you were with the Senators, so you weren't on the team with him that season. And also, I'm a little confused when you brought up Ricky Henderson because you were the pitching coach for the Phillies between '82 and '88, and there was no interleague play back then. And '82 was when Ricky Henderson stole his 130 bases. And so there was no interleague play back then, like I said, and you weren't pitching coach for the Rangers until the mid-'90s, so I'm just wondering about that.
Well, let me correct you a little bit. I'm not a stat guy by any means, and you got the privilege of looking things up, so you can look this up. I saw Ricky Henderson lift the second base up from its position. Now, I don't know if it was when I was with St. Louis, but I saw it, so you can look it up and find out where I was when he did it. I was in the ballpark.
Yes, I think it was against Texas in '91 when it happened. Yeah, I think...
Okay, I was the pitching coach for Texas.
Yes, it says that you were the pitching coach in '93 and '94, and he broke the stolen base record in '91. So maybe you were with the front office, or maybe you were in attendance that day, or maybe you had some kind of position with the club.
Well, anyway, I saw it. It really doesn't matter, but I had the privilege of seeing all three of them.
Which is really something very special, three of the greatest base stealers in history. So your final season with the White Sox was in '75, and not the best year for you. Unfortunately, you had declined by then. And just before 1976 started, they released you. Did you try to join another team, or did you know that was it for you?
No, I knew that was basically it for me. I had an opportunity. It was between Oakland, the Oakland A's, and the White Sox as to which team I was going to sign with after I was released, and I felt a little safer going to the White Sox because the contract that Oakland was offering me had a lot of stipulations in it, and they were in control of the contract. They could have released me again at almost any time they wanted to, and I wanted, for my final year or years, I wanted more of a guarantee than that. So I chose to sign with the White Sox, and it was a good, interesting year. It was my last active year. I had started to think about coaching, and knew that I wanted to go in and do that, and so all the decisions that came about helped me make the right moves.
So then who or what inspired you to become a pitching coach then? Was it Johnny Sain who was your pitching coach your last year with the White Sox, or when was it? When did you realize, hey, I want to do this after I hang it up?
Well, I think it was a combination of those things that you mentioned, the pitching coaches that I had, and also I thought that I really learned more about the fact that I I thought I could convey the teaching part of pitching. I spent so much time in the last 5 years that I pitched where I really got to learn probably more about myself than I did previously. And so I kind of had the urge to pass all that knowledge on, and I thought I could help a lot of young pitchers.
So then, what do you think was the biggest, most important thing that you had passed on to your pitchers then, in that case? What do you think was the most important thing that you taught them? What was the one thing you wanted to stress to them above all else?
Well, I always thought pitching was about the ability to make pitches, and of course, a lot of things go hand in hand there, where I knew that I could teach control, and I knew how to do that, and I knew that if I could get a hold of good arms, I could take a picture of a guy having tremendous success, because you put those two things together, the guy that's got the great stuff and the guy that can put it where it belongs consistently, he's going to win. He's going to win big. So that's what drove me, and I thought that I knew a lot about the delivery itself and how to reach the balance points where you've got total control of the delivery, and those things, of course, make control completely, synchronization, and I was so eager to pass all that along.
And you had a lot of different stints with the Cardinals, and I think that a former teammate of yours, Bob Forrest, was also a guy that you coached in St. Louis. You coached with the Rangers, the Dodgers, and of course the Phillies, like I mentioned a couple times earlier in this interview. And so that was an interesting season in Philadelphia in 1983. And aside from the fact of winning the pennant, one other thing stands out to me is that Pat Corrales, you guys were in first place, but you were one game above 500, and so Paul Owens was general manager. He fired Pat Corrales, and he put himself in the dugout. So how shocked were you at that firing, and what kind of effect, if at all, did that have on you and your pitchers?
Well, I was surprised, totally surprised at that, and it not to the point that I could do anything about it. You can't, and you can't let those things that happen that are out of your control affect your teaching or your play. We had a very veteran ball club, if I'm not mistaken. I believe those were the years that we had Rose and Perez and Schmidt and all those guys, and of course they were fantastic ball players. Some were near the end of their careers, but I guess at the time we weren't clicking to the owner's satisfaction, and probably that's why they made the move. And Paul Owens was a baseball man who'd been in the game for a lifetime, and he was the general manager at the time, and so things seemed to work out. The one thing that I remember that was an interesting thing is about the last week or so of the season, Pete Rose was having so much trouble getting the ball out of the infield, and he was hitting ground balls, weak ground balls, and just really in a slump. And we get to the series, and there's a left-hander going to pitch against us, and Paul Owens called the coaching staff in, and he said, I'm thinking about playing Tony Perez at first base in place of Rose. And of course, I think the first thing that all of us thought instantly when he told us that is, first of all, it right move to make, and secondly, how was he going to handle the press when they come to him and Rose is benched for the series? And so we all almost in unison said to Pope, if you've got the nerve to do it, we think it's the right move. And of course, I don't think anyone would have said that if Rose had been doing his normal thing at that time, but he wasn't, and whether he was tired, I don't know, or whether he was in a slump. All I know is just it was a bunch of weak ground balls, and of course you had Perez there who hit left-handers pretty well, and I think I believe we got a split in Baltimore 1-1, and we were happy about that. We could have won both games, but all I know is Perez did hit a home run, and so I think the thing that made that move easy for Pope was that the fact that Pete Rose himself handled the press with total class, and he took all the pressure off of Pope making that decision.
Yes, indeed. The Phillies won Game 1 of that series and lost the next 4 games. And those Orioles, again, Claude, giving you trouble just like they did in '66. How could the pitching have been better for the Phillies in that series, in your opinion?
Well, one thing that we did is we did not pitch some of the key hitters well. We constantly threw Dempsey high fastballs, and he was a high fastball hitter, and he won the Most Valuable Player award, I believe, as a result of it. And not to take anything away from him, but it's kind of like a pitcher having a guy that hits him very well, and the guy has his number, and no matter what you do, you know what maybe the hitter's weakness is, but you can't get the ball in the location that you want to. And this was the case with us and Dempsey. And so, had we controlled him, I don't know if we'd have won the series, but we could have been close there.
And it shows you how the most unlikely sources or the most unusual suspects can come through because, as you mentioned, Dempsey won the MVP of that World Series, and yet he only hit 4 home runs during that regular season.
That's right. That's right. And, of course, well, it just tells you if a team gets to the World Series, they're not there for by way of a mistake. Everybody on the club's got talent, and you're capable of performing. You just may not have done it in the season with regularity, but these are special times, and guys rise to the occasion and do things that they never knew they could do.
Yes, well, you guys still did win the pennant that year, and you still coached them for almost the rest of the 80s. And then, like I said, the Rangers and the Dodgers. You returned to the Dodgers in 1999, also the pitching coach in 2000. What was it like to put that uniform on again for the Dodgers, knowing how you had pitched for them for 9 seasons? What was it like to put that uniform on again, the Dodgers?
Well, it was exciting, and it should have been maybe the best pitching coaching job that I had. However, it didn't turn out that way. There was so much going on with the ball club, new ownership, new people coming in. Davey Johnson was there, who I think is a very good manager. There were pressures going every which way, and the unknown was kind of every night affair there. And so me, the 2 years that I spent there should have been the best job I ever had as a pitching coach, but it certainly didn't turn out that way.
So then, what would you call the best job you had? Was it in Philadelphia as a pitching coach?
I would have to say Philadelphia, yes. I did enjoy my time in St. Louis. I had to go through a couple managerial changes there. We had Kenny Boyer as manager, who I loved, and Whitey Herzog. I thought Whitey was probably the best manager that I've ever worked with, as far as the way that he ran the game and put together a team. I thought Whitey was brilliant. But Philadelphia, I really enjoyed my time there. It was fun.
And justifiably so. A pennant, 3 Cy Young winners. Makes sense you would say that. A lot has changed since you left the game and as a pitching coach. I was wondering if I can get your thoughts on some of the new rules in baseball now. As I'm sure you might be aware, they now have time mound visits in which pitching coaches only get 30 seconds on the mound to talk to their pitchers. I was wondering if you could tell me what you think of that, and also how you would have handled that if they had that back in your day.
Well, I don't entirely object to that. It's not one of my favorite rules, but I could have put up with it had it been there. A lot of times, I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to speed up the game. It probably has helped a little bit, but my gosh, you've got the instant replay now, which takes a lot more time than we pitching coaches took to go out on the mound.
But it is important, though. So if you think the time mound visits isn't necessarily the best way to speed up the game, then what do you think are some of the ways that could help speed up the game better?
Well, I've always thought that walking a batter intentionally, I thought that was a waste of time. You could have the manager just direct the umpire that, hey, 4 balls and nobody has to throw any pitches, and the guy goes to first base and it's over with. I don't know. It'd be hard to figure out the percentages of pitchers who throw wild pitches when they're trying to walk a guy intentionally. I would say it's very minimal. But that's one way, and probably a good way to start with. It's an interesting thing. I've listened to some of the ideas that have been tossed around. I think they have rules where a batter is not allowed to go back and get pine tar, but they find a reason to go back and get another bat or something like that. So, you know, it is enforced and it isn't enforced.
Some interesting ideas. Couple more questions before we end this. What do you miss the most about putting on that uniform, both as a pitcher and a pitching coach? What do you miss most about the game now that you're retired?
Well, I think it's the camaraderie and the competition. The idea of standing out there and finding out if you can execute the things that you've got on your mind to do and seek out the weaknesses of hitters. I think that I miss that part of it. I really, in watching the game today, I really think the thing that's missing on the pitching part is that pitchers, they don't seem to play the game in the inning that they're pitching in. In other words, what I'm saying is, you got 9 innings of baseball, and every single inning is a different inning. And for instance, you play the first inning, and you might be ahead by 3 runs before you ever throw a pitch. If you're playing on the road, you hit first, and you're up 3 runs. Well, now the second inning that you pitch, or the first inning that you pitch, is a totally different inning than an inning which says the score's 0-0. So as you go through the 9 innings of baseball, every inning changes, and it also affects what you should or should not do as a pitcher. And I see practically none of that today. For instance, you're going into the 7th or 8th inning with a 1-0 lead, and the first thing that you'll see it so many times, pitcher will go out there and walk the leadoff hitter on 4 pitches with no thought about what the consequences are in doing that. I mean, I think there's an old stat that I'm sure it's still prevalent. If you walk the leadoff hitter, he scores almost 77% of the time, approximately. And there's no regard for those things. I don't see them anywhere. If you've got a 3-run lead, you certainly don't start walking people in the 8th or 9th inning. And I mean, it's one thing to say, well, I tried to throw a strike, but I always thought as a pitching coach, I could tell when a guy did not want to throw the ball over the plate. So those are the things that I miss, seeing the game played what I would call the right way. On the other side of the coin, I enjoy the power pitching part of it. I enjoy making the assessment of what kind of an arm this guy does and what his ball does. Does his fastball hop? Does he have tremendous movement? I enjoy seeing that today. But as far as finding a pure pitcher who knows what it's all about out there and can take that power and research a hitter's weakness, I see very little of that.
But what do you miss, though? What do you miss about the experience? What do you miss about going out there and putting on that uniform? What do you in particular miss about all of this?
Well, I think it's just the game itself. The camaraderie in it, the travel. The travel never bothered me at all until I retired, and then I started asking myself, how did I do this for this long? Because I know what travel is today, I think. But back then, it was fun for me. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was never at a loss for something to do when I was on a road trip or any of those things. I was an early riser. I couldn't wait to see what the next city presented. And also, most importantly, doing those things with your teammates. I miss that.
That's what I was going for. Last but not least, you're a former Dodger. There's been one constant with the Dodgers ever since 1950, and this will be the year, Vince Scully's final year. He's only got a couple more months. And so what has Vince Scully meant to you? If you have any stories about him you want to share, if you have any personal encounters with him that you think are mention-worthy, what about Vince Scully, how has he impacted your life ever since you've gotten to know him?
Well, of course, he's obviously a legend, and the man with the golden voice, the vast amount of knowledge about baseball, the stories, all that stuff. We know he's got all of that. One of the amazing things that I and this was my opinion. We've discussed this several times with other players, other pitchers, Dodgers. Is we were discussing, what is it that makes Scully the best? And in Los Angeles in the 60s, of course, we had great pitching, and we were always a contender and going for the pennant. And when we would have a series, it didn't matter who was coming in. If it were the Pirates, Vince would really, really expound on what great players they had. And he didn't have to build them up too much because they were great players, but he would make it really special about them coming into town. And I come to find out that, at least this was my opinion, that it made so much more of a feat when we defeated them in the eyes of Dodger fans. And I thought that was really, really interesting, how he was able to do that, because, they, at the time when I was there, we always had Scully piped into the clubhouse and into the training room. So wherever you were, if you were in the clubhouse or the training room while a game is going on, you hear every word Scully says. And I thought he was brilliant in doing that. It made such a monumental accomplishment when we would go out and beat these guys that he has told the Dodger fans about and how great they were. And obviously, I don't want this to sound like he didn't make us seem great. He did, but that was one factor that really, really impressed me with him. And obviously, he's a great guy, and he treated me with just I couldn't ask to be treated any better by anyone than Scully did me in all my performances and everything like that.
Well, I'm sure, and he's a true definition of a legend. Well, that's going to do it for this interview, folks. For Claude Osteen, I'm Corey Stolzenbach. Thank you so much to our listeners. You all have a great day, everybody.